Okay, Jameson, we're good.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jameson Bobbin. I'm the board chair of the Economic Development Alliance. We tried a little bit of a new venue this week or this month to be able to kind of see who all is on the call. So I'm seeing many faces and names that I've not seen in a very long time. Looks like Brad has still not gotten a haircut. Good to see you, Brad Tafoya. I saw Mike Russell out there, a little blast from the past. So really good to see some familiar names and faces out there. We appreciate all you joining this morning. We'll go ahead and kick off this membership meeting. As far as a board update, our board meeting was last week. We had a really good update on Durango Mesa Park and kind of the developments that are going on there and the end kind of vision for that plan. And then also really started to have some conversations around a potential summit and what that might look like. Whether that's in the cards this year, how we can pull something off to kind of get everybody back together. I know all of us want to be there. So that's really the update from the board. I'll turn it over to Michael French, our executive director, for the executive director update.
Thanks, Jameson. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate Dan Corman. He's our board member and a friend. This morning, he and his wife gave birth to their second daughter about 90 minutes ago. Welcome to the world, Miss Corman. So the format this time around is not the webinar, which allows everybody to see the panelists only. Based on feedback from Mr. Tafoya, which I think was great. He said, I'd love to see who else is on the call, be able to chat with them individually, et cetera. That's some of the value that we had in person. So we're going to try to make this work this way until we can meet in person again, which hopefully is soon. Operationally, we are undergoing a CRM conversion to Salesforce right now. We expect to complete that in the next few weeks. We don't think that that'll interrupt any of our business, but it will help our membership management and reporting. We're also transitioning to an accrued accounting process, and all adjustments will be made in this first quarter. We expect to have approximately $15,000 of costs that we need to recognize and get level set. But financially, we still expect to be in good shape. We received our PPP monies, and right now they're offset with a liability until they're formally forgiven, but we expect those funds to be recognized in Q3. With our continued focus on workforce housing, we've collaborated with Durango Renewal Partnership to host a developers forum. Alex will give a more detail of that later on this morning, and he'll also give us an update on the URA. And lastly, as Jameson said, we're committing to a economic development summit in October of 2021. It's still fluid. Obviously, the landscape may change on us, but we're excited to at least start thinking about what's important in terms of the future state of our economy and get back to a conference that I think everybody's looking forward to attending. So with that said, we have a very full agenda as usual, maybe a little overzealous, but some great updates. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jameson.
Thank you, Mike. As always, we like to pack the agenda, and we typically love to lead off with none other than Brian Devine from San Juan Basin Health. Hopefully this update will be a little bit different from last month's update. Big talk on vaccinations. I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Jameson. I sent in slides last night. I'm not sure if they're in your presentation or if I'll need to share my screen. Happy to do either one.
You'll need to share your screen.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
make you a host.
No problem. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Devine. I'm the Environmental Health Director at San Juan Basin Public Health. I'm also our Deputy Incident Commander for COVID-19 response.
Can you share?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay.
There we go. Took a second for the window to show up. So the Alliance asked me to give a vaccination report this morning. I'm going to start just by sharing out some of our important messages from public health, which does start with vaccine, along with several of our partner vaccine providers and a whole host of community volunteers. We administered over 3,000 doses of the recently authorized Johnson & Johnson or Janssen Pharmaceuticals vaccine this past weekend in La Plata and Archuleta counties. We do cover both counties. That's out of 4,000 doses that we received from the state for use this weekend. That's the biggest vaccine weekend that we've ever had here in Southwest Colorado by some distance. So we continue to scale up and make our network of providers and vaccine opportunities more sustainable, so we don't have to always put together a fire drill when we get an unexpected delivery of a large quantity of vaccine. The second important message today is about variants. You've probably heard a lot about coronavirus variants. We do have cases confirmed in our community of the so-called California variant. We were also notified yesterday of an additional variant that's still under investigation. So variants are concerning because they appear to be either more transmissible or cause more severe disease or both. So the presence of variants in our community, including in people who do not have a recent travel history, is very concerning. It means that we do need to double down on our public health precautions, such as proper mask wearing, mask fit, avoiding large gatherings, especially indoors, etc. All those things that you're accustomed to, we need to be extra cautious about, extra careful about, because we do have these more transmissible or more severe variants circulating in our community. The other things I want to highlight are just that the CDC released guidance yesterday for individuals who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Obviously, people have been wondering what they can do once they get vaccinated and time has passed. So please take a look at that guidance. It is at the moment really applicable to household gatherings. It is not applicable to workplaces. It's really intended for gatherings of 2 households, small groups. So unless your business is made up entirely of household and family members, this is generally going to be applicable not to your workplace, although I'm sure workplace guidance will be coming out in the near future. And then La Plata County is in level yellow. On the state's COVID-19 dial, we do have a new public health order with some small changes to capacities at various levels of the dial. As far as vaccine goes, we are in phase 1B3 of the state's vaccine distribution timeline. We started March 5th, which was Friday, with phase 1B3, adding in people age 60 and older, some of our frontline essential workers in food and agriculture, as well as people with 2 or more high-risk medical conditions. The intent of phased distribution is to prioritize those who are more likely to acquire the virus, because they work indoors in close contact with many people, as well as those who are likely to have more severe cases because they are older or have high-risk conditions. You'll see there's a very large list on the right of the slide with phase 1B4 beginning in late March that adds additional age groups as well as additional categories of frontline essential workers and people with 1 high-risk condition. Phase 1B3, as I said, includes agriculture and grocery workers. This is not everybody who works in agriculture. The intent is to prioritize workers who cannot maintain physical distance from others at their place of employment, especially indoors and with poor ventilation. So that's really grocery store workers, meat packing, and agricultural processing, not everybody who works in the food and agriculture sector. And then you can see the high-risk conditions listed at the bottom right. So if you have 2 or more of those, you are eligible for a vaccine in Colorado. One thing I'll point out is when we move into a different phase, we don't get rid of the previous phase. So obviously everybody who's in phase 1A, 1B1, or 1B2 remains eligible for vaccination in Colorado as well. Phase 1B3 is a very large number of people. It's about 950,000 Coloradans. We think it's about 13,000 people in La Plata and Archuleta counties combined. So it is going to take some time before we get these phases substantially complete. When we make a new phase eligible in Colorado, it does. If we don't have, that doesn't mean we have vaccine for 100% of them available on the first day, of course. Phase 1B4, the state anticipates late March. Their current estimate is March 21st for eligibility for phase 1B4. That could shift, of course, but it's based on the projected vaccine deliveries from the federal government to the state. So if it does move, it won't probably move by very much. This is an even larger group of people. It's 2.5 million Coloradans. That's 50% of the state's adult population. It's a huge group, obviously including people with high-risk conditions. Our food service and restaurant workers are a very large group, as well as everyone age 50 to 59. So again, when this group becomes eligible, we will not have 2.5 million vaccines available for them on the first day. It does take time to get through the group, although the vaccine supply coming to the state and then coming to La Plata County continues to slowly increase. We're ahead of the curve here in La Plata County. You can see up at the top statewide statistics from before the weekend. One thing we struggle with in Colorado is delays in data entry for vaccination. So these are always going to be a few days old. As of the beginning of the weekend, over 1 million people in Colorado had been immunized with at least one dose. So that's about 20% of the adult population in Colorado. For La Plata County, 28% of La Plata County's total population has been vaccinated with at least one dose. That's our internal calculation based on what we know about clinics from this weekend. But the weekend clinics have not gone through the official data validation process. So again, that could adjust a little bit up or down. 78% of the 70 plus population and 58% of the 60 plus population have received at least one dose. And those are validated data, so they have gone up with our weekend clinics. And then we estimate that about 18% of La Plata County's total population has been fully vaccinated. So they have either 2 doses of a 2-dose vaccine or a single dose of the single dose Johnson & Johnson or Janssen Pharmaceuticals vaccine. Again, that's an estimate based on the validated data plus what we know about this weekend. Of course, 18% fully vaccinated does not mean 18% immune. It does take time for the body to develop full immunity after completing vaccination. The standard is to consider yourself maximum immunity 2 weeks after your final vaccination. We're reliant on a wide network of providers in both of our cases for vaccination. You can see we're adding new providers onto this list all the time. We have some new providers that actually did their first doses this weekend that don't even appear in this chart yet. So there's plenty of places to get a vaccine. You can always visit our website to find a vaccine provider and the latest eligibility information. We also update our vaccine data twice a week on our dashboard, sjbpublichealth.org/coronavirus. You can see our validated statistics as of March 6th are on there. We update this on Mondays and Thursdays. So the final statistics from our big weekend push will hopefully be integrated into the database for Thursday's update. You can see vaccinations by age group, vaccinations over time, as well as percentages of the population. And our team is working this week to add race, ethnicity, and provider level data to this dashboard as well. So we're very excited. Our dashboard is the best resource for you, in between these meetings or other meetings that you may attend. Most of the statistics on our dashboard are updated once a day, including on weekends. The exception is the vaccine stats, which are updated on Mondays and Thursdays. Finally, let me just put out a call to community-based organizations. There's an opportunity that the state provides for community-based organizations, which is really broadly defined to host a state-run vaccine clinic. If approved, these clinics are run by the state. The state provides all the clinical and administrative staff. They ask for your help with providing a location and like greeters and parking lot attendants, things like that. And the vaccine that comes to this clinic comes out of a statewide allocation, not out of our regional or county level allocation. So it is a way to bring additional doses to the region and keep us up at the forefront of vaccination rates. Southwest Colorado has the highest vaccination rate in Colorado. As you can see, a couple examples. Town of Ignacio has already hosted one of these, another on March 13th, this weekend. Our thanks to ARC of Southwest Colorado and Adaptive Sports for hosting a clinic on March 22nd. We know there are other applications currently under review. Any of you who represent a community-based organization or who have some sort of partnership with a community-based organization that might serve an eligible population, right? We've got a lot of eligible populations now by age and by high-risk medical condition. If you might be interested in hosting a CBO clinic, it does bring additional vaccine to our region and is a great way to vaccinate populations that might have difficulty accessing a traditional clinic. So please contact us. We have a lot of experience getting these applications through the process. Please get a hold of San Juan Basin Public Health if you might be interested or need any assistance. And with that, that is my rushed update from San Juan Basin Public Health.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Congrats to the community. I mean, for Southwest Colorado to kind of lead the way on vaccinations is just fantastic news. We'll turn it over to Tony Vicari with the airport.
Good morning. I'm Tony Vicari, Aviation Director at the Durango-La Plata County Airport. Emily will be sharing there we go. All right, so just here to provide a brief update of the airport as we continue to recover through the pandemic. Just starting off with public health, a lot of information here, no need to dive into the depths of it. I would just sum it up to say that the airport for a year now has been highly committed to maximizing its commitment to public health in our facilities. And the proof is really in the pudding in the sense that we're a year into the pandemic and have had 0 COVID-19 outbreaks attributed to the airport here locally, which I think speaks volumes to the commitment of the airport and its staff. Next slide. So looking overall at impact of the pandemic in 2020, you can see the dramatic impact in commercial airline enplanements. Our overall total passengers decreased just about half from 2019, wiping out about 15 years of total enplanement growth. Next slide. Looking a little closer at the month-to-month breakout of 2020, you can see in January and February, the airport was notching all-time record highs for enplane traffic. That was carried on from 2019, which was an all-time record year for passenger enplanement activity at DRO. And then obviously the impacts of the pandemic started in earnest in the latter half of March and then into April, where enplane traffic bottomed out at 4% of prior year. That slowly but steadily grew through the summer, peaking in October with some slight settling in the last quarter of the year as pandemic concerns increased both locally and nationwide. Looking here, you can see the offset of proportionate recovery at Durango offset against the U.S. Total daily average for airports across the country. Durango is in the blue and the U.S. average is in the orange. And what you can see is starting essentially on the 4th of July, we started to see the gap open up where the proportionate recovery here at DRO began to outpace and then significantly outpace overall U.S. recovery. That's consistent with patterns that we've seen throughout the country where markets have displayed much higher resilience, specifically in the Mountain West as well as Southern Beach communities, whereas we've seen much more lag in terms of overall recovery in coastal markets, large urban markets, hubs, and international destinations. Next slide. A lot of bars going on here. This is just a quick snapshot of regional airports in the state of Colorado, trying to give a little bit of a proportionate look here. This is just proportionate 15-day moving average for daily traffic counts at airports across the state. Just to a little bit of reference there, the orange line is Durango. So you can see the daily recovery from the lows back in April, building through the summer, peaking in the fall, and then settling back in the last quarter of the year overall. And just kind of looking overall, the position of DRO relative to the state remains the same as it was before the pandemic. We remain the 5th busiest commercial service airport in the state, behind Denver, Colorado Springs, Grand Junction, and Aspen. So that position has remained unchanged. When you look at the state as a whole, the regional airports in the state have recovered stronger proportionately than the major hub airport in Denver, as well as the other Front Range airport in Colorado Springs. Our overall recovery pattern most similarly patterns Grand Junction. We are comparable markets and we've seen somewhat similar comparable proportionate recoveries and trends throughout the pandemic. Conversely, if you look at places like Montrose and Aspen, they've seen proportionately strong recovery, although it's a bit skewed if you look at proportionate recovery just because the fall data in those markets shows a fairly resilient recovery. However, you're comparing against months that are traditionally low traffic, given that they're much more ski-oriented communities. And so you can see, well, not on this graph, but on others, it looks like places like Montrose, Aspen, and then even more significantly, Eagle, Steamboat Springs, and Gunnison pushing close to 100% recovery by the fall. But that's really a skew that we see based on, as I mentioned, ski traffic overall. In general, the ski service airports, which are most of the last 5 I just issued or mentioned, will see stronger overall proportionate 2020 numbers, just because they did see the first 2 months of the year, which is peak ski service season, bring through full proportionate traffic. Obviously huge impacts in the spring, but the summer and fall are traditionally low tide for those markets. And so the overall losses that most airports saw weren't as proportionately heavy in those markets. Next slide. It's just a quick rundown on different activity metrics at the airport. A lot of numbers here, but I'll just focus on the blue column on the far right, which is 2020 totals. We mentioned earlier the 49% decrease in 2020 for emplaned airline traffic. That's a baseline for us from a revenue and tracking standpoint. And you can see where there's some disproportionately performing metrics at the airport. Parking revenue, which is largely a measure of local utilization of the airport, is tending to lag airline passenger traffic. At times that is deeply lagged overall traffic, which is reflective of suppressed local use of the airport. On the flip side, you can see the much more resilient number on rental car revenue, only down 19% from 2020 from 19. And that's really reflective of a shockingly resilient inbound tourism component at the airport, which we'll talk about in a minute. Aviation fuel flowage was also a stronger performing metric, largely attributable to strength on the general aviation side of the house. So private aviation, relatively strong seat capacity restoration by the airlines in the second half of the year, and Forest Service tanker-based fueling throughout the summer combating forest fires. Air freight was the outlier here with a year-over-year increase. We are all pretty familiar with the increased utilization of air freight and the modern times. And then concession revenue, which is principally food, beverage, news, and gift in the terminal, matched lockstep with overall traffic. Looking a little bit more in depth at the airlines, our flight schedules have stabilized. Currently, you can see the February and March flight schedule. We're currently operating 4 to 5 daily flights to Denver on United Airlines, 3 daily to Dallas, and 2 daily to Phoenix, both on American. That's been a consistent schedule since approximately November, and is likely to be the case here in March, obviously, and also in April before we see some changes heading towards the summer. Seat capacity has been relatively aggressively restored in our market. You can see the bar chart below where you see proportionate recovery of seats in the last quarter of 2020 approaching 75% of pre-pandemic. So what we've really seen is the carriers are seeing some resilience in our market and are restoring seats in conjunction with that demand. Next slide. So looking a little bit at demographics here, these are passenger surveys. There's a lot of bars going on here. Just to orient you on each of these areas, the first two, the blue and orange, are baseline pre-pandemic winter and summer numbers for each. And then the rest are months from August 20 through current, looking at trend differentiations. The really short summation is that we have proportionately strong leisure and visitor traffic and proportionately weak business and local resident traffic. You can see that depicted on these charts here. Business travel proportionate to pre-pandemic levels is about half of what it was before, whereas leisure traffic is really taking the game. Even here in February, we saw close to 60% of our overall traffic was leisure oriented. And then, as we mentioned, with parking revenue below, you can see the suppressed full-time local resident use far below traditional levels, particularly wintertime levels. You can see in those January and February charts still lagging deeply below the pre-pandemic baseline we saw for local resident use. And on the flip side, you can see the continued strength on inbound visitation continues to really carry the day, far exceeding what we traditionally have seen for proportionate winter traffic in particular. And then there's also some pretty good resilience on these seasonal and second homeowners. Looking a little bit more in depth at passenger surveying, we conducted some significant surveying from late summer through fall. A lot of points here, just kind of high notes on this. We did see significant strength in the South Census region, led predominantly by Texas. Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio as metro areas all had statistically significant increases in their proportionate traffic into the market. Our overall passenger age increased slightly, medium income, household income increased slightly, average trip duration increased slightly to just over 5 nights. And then we saw some pivots overall for lodging locations for visitors increasing substantially in the Pagosa Springs area. Pre-pandemic, that was about 7% of our visitation traffic was lodging in Pagosa, up to almost 20% post-pandemic. And then on the flip side, we saw sharp decreases for inbound lodging in the Farmington, New Mexico area, likely attributable to the differentiation and health restrictions across the state line. Durango as a market remained steady, very consistent pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, clearly the number one. About 60% of inbound lodging nights for visitation were in the Durango market. And then the one I'm proud of definitely is that last statistic there was that 98% of all of our surveyed passengers were satisfied with airport health and safety precautions and protocols. So really pleased with that. And then just on this chart here, when we look at this, we talk about sort of market strength overall. Really, to sort of sum it up, what we've seen is folks are entrenched in our core markets. If you just look over at the other category, you can see the orange and blue bar charts, the pre-pandemic baseline making up about 65% of overall destinations out of the market. And then you can see all the points post-pandemic here falling at 40% or lower, meaning that the predominance of our traffic is really centered in on core markets like Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, and several others aren't listed here, like the Houston, Los Angeles, and other large markets. Next slide. So on to the positive news on the recovery. We've made a few announcements here in the last couple of weeks about airline service for the upcoming late spring and summer. In February, we announced that American Airlines will be establishing seasonal daily service between Los Angeles International Airport and DRO with once daily nonstop flights through the June, July, and half of August timeframe. This is a restoration of pre-pandemic seasonal traffic we saw. However, that traffic was only on Saturdays, whereas this traffic will be daily service throughout the summer period. So we're very excited to see how that route performs on a more consistent basis instead of just the summer and Saturday type service. It'll create a great baseline for us. Americans' perspective and thought process here is numerous points. One being freed up equipment with lesser performing routes. The other being the potential for scooping up leisure demand into Mountain West locations like Durango. That route is likely to attract fairly significant inbound visitation interest out of the Southern California market. And then the very big news for us, which we just recently announced last week, is that we'll be launching Delta Airlines service with year-round permanent daily service between Salt Lake City International Airport and Durango beginning on May 12th. That'll start with one flight daily, and then 2 weeks in, we'll kick up to 2 frequencies per day, and that will be the norm carrying forward. It's a big add for us to get Delta into the market. Adding the third legacy carrier, creating that additional competition will put downward pressure on fares, increased service options, connectivity options, and then obviously open up a whole new airline route network for us to be able to tap into here in Durango. So we're really excited to be able to launch that in just about 2 months. Next slide. So looking at longer term recovery forecasting, looking a little bit in the crystal ball, you can see some of the industry forecasts on the far left there. Most industry forecasts put a full pre-pandemic travel recovery in the 2023, 4, 5 range on the whole. However, what we're going to see is significant differentiation between markets. With what we've seen so far is Durango is on the outperforming side, and we're likely to continue to see that. Looking over at the far right, you can see our recovery forecast. This is what the airport's 2021 budget was based off of in terms of individual month offset against pre-pandemic levels. We've already outperformed this in January by about 10 percentage points, likely to post a similar number in February. And what you'll see is the airport continuing to revise this recovery forecast with our latest news on the American Delta front, as well as encouraging news on the public health front. I think it's very likely that each of these numbers will add at least 10 percentage points to them, particularly during the summer and fall when we see peak utilization of the airport historically. Next slide. And just touching on budget impacts, obviously major impacts to the airport. We've lost half of our airline passenger traffic in 2020. You can see the chart on the left showing the last decade of revenue versus expenses at the airport and the major impacts that occurred in 2020 relative to significant revenue changes overall. In 2020, our total operating and restricted revenue reductions totaled just about $1.5 million. However, the airport does remain in really quite resilient shape. We were in strong pre-pandemic cash position with close to a year and a half of cash on hand, and we're sitting in a really strong position. And through the CARES Act funding through Congress, as well as the recent CRISA grant funding, both of those programs made funding available for operational needs at commercial service airports, including DRO. That for us so far has totaled about $4.4 million in eligible operating expenses to be reimbursed off of those grants. And to date, that looks like it's going to fully make whole the airport in terms of offsetting the revenue losses that we experienced in 2020 and will likely for several years to come as we continue to restore overall in plane traffic. But we're in a really strong position and feel like we're going to be able to continue to move forward with our capital investment plan. Next slide. Real quick recap of 2020. So obviously a challenging year, but we're proud of our staff and everything we were able to accomplish despite the headwinds. We were able to complete our terminal area plan study update, which pointed a new direction for us in terms of long-term terminal development. We paid off a $3.9 million land acquisition financing with a large portion of federal grant funds, reconstructed our commercial apron, which is a $4 million project that utilized a local general contractor, putting people to work at the airport, renovated 5 public restrooms in the terminal, and completed numerous other capital projects. So continuing to move forward on facilities here at the airport. Next slide. And lastly, we won't dive into this at all, but just given a quick snapshot with all the disruption that happened in 2020, many people might not have been quite as clued in to the overall terminal area plan update that the airport underwent and ultimately adopted in the June timeframe. This is a quick overhead snapshot. We can certainly take this offline to a different timeframe where we can discuss this in more depth, but to sum it up, the airport has altered its master plan to what was proposed in recent years to potentially relocate the terminal facilities to the eastern side of the airfield on a greenfield site, constructing new facilities altogether. That plan has been changed and altered into what you see here today, which is a redevelopment of the existing footprint of the overall terminal. That was made possible in part by a land acquisition that was mentioned earlier. We acquired about 12.5 acres of land in 2019 that is adjacent to the terminal area complex, allowing for additional flexibility and growth as it relates to airport support infrastructure. So as we continue to reset our capital plans and operational budgets here throughout 2021, we'll have a keen focus on how we can continue to move forward on these development plans, given our what has proven to be resilient financial and operational position. And I believe that is everything I have.
Awesome. Great update, Tony. Thank you so much. We'll turn it over to Alex Rugoff to talk through the Urban Renewal Authority. Morning, Alex.
Morning. Thank you, Jameson. Thank you, Tony and Brian. I'm Alex Rugoff, Business Development and Redevelopment Coordinator for the City of Durango. I also serve as staff to the city's Urban Renewal Authority, which we refer to as the Durango Renewal Partnership. We're excited to discuss some major achievements and some exciting opportunities around the URA. It's very timely to be talking here this morning. Just to give a bigger overview of what exactly an Urban Renewal Authority is, it's a redevelopment agency that uses public-private partnerships and incentives to help revitalize a target area. One of the most valuable incentives that's available to URA is what's known as tax increment financing, or TIF. I'll start off, it's not a tax increase, but it uses the newly generated tax revenue from a development project, either the local property or sales tax, to help offset some of those development costs. And some of those development costs could be putting in new infrastructure. Maybe it's having to put in a new water main or do the sidewalks and landscaping and curb and gutter. And that can add to a development project and make it unfeasible. So that's where the URA can step in and make that project pencil out. There are over about 60 URAs across Colorado, and they've been used a lot to help with historic preservation and adaptive reuse. Historic preservation is obviously a huge part of our downtown character, and it's what makes us unique and helps create a sense of place for Durango. We also envision using the URA to help with some small property improvement grants, things like facade improvements, exterior improvements, and really target that in this area we're calling Midtown that I'll get to in a little bit. But we see the URA as being a partner for some big projects as well as some smaller projects, help some local businesses make some investments and have the URA be that public partner in those investments. URAs do things like streetscaping enhancements, that's planting trees, putting out bike lanes, making the area a little more multimodal, a little more bikeable and walkable, as well as car friendly. And one thing we're really using the URA here, one of the biggest targets of the Durango Renewal Partnership, and when I say Durango Renewal Partnership, that's our URA. We feel the Durango Renewal Partnership better reflects our URA's values. But one of the biggest top priorities is workforce and affordable housing. It's why we're focusing on this first area that I'll get to in a bit. And we see the URA as being that partner that can help provide a financial incentive, as well as help a developer get through the planning process to make a workforce housing project come online. We've been excited to work with some workforce housing developers and get some interest in some projects locally. When we started this, it's been about several years in the making to actually form the URA, but over the last few years, staff has gone out and we've met with the major economic development organizations, such as the Alliance, the Chamber, the BID, as well as meeting with all the local taxing entities, the county, the school district, and really trying to understand what their priorities are in terms of development. What we heard over time and time again is the need for workforce housing, how difficult it is for companies to recruit here, how difficult it is to recruit teachers and county workers and police officers when the cost of living in Durango has gone up increasingly so over the last year, but over the last 5-7 years, whereas the wages have not kept up with housing costs. And so we worked with these entities and helped come up with the Durango Renewal Partnership in creating our vision and what we want to see. And you can go to the next slide. And the first area that we're targeting is known as the Midtown area. It's really our north of downtown, all the way up to the River Trail. It's what we see as really between our two most valuable assets in our historic downtown and the Animas River and River Trail. But we see a lot of underutilized lots in here. We looked at a lot of data such as Florida area ratio and assessment values and tried to be specific and intentional in drawing this boundary. There are also several different public properties that are going on the market soon, such as are already on the market, such as the 9R administration building. And those provide a really big opportunity to use the tax increment financing, because the tax increment financing creates uses the future tax revenue from a project to help facilitate that project coming online. And so if you look at something like a public building that's generating essentially zero in property taxes and zero in sales taxes, if it goes on to say a mixed use project that has some housing components, maybe has a commercial component on the bottom floor, now it's generating a lot more in property and or sales tax, and that can go back to help offset those development costs. It could be used to ensure that some of those housing units remain affordable to workers earning 80% of the area median income. It really makes, depends obviously on the numbers and what the project is, but it provides some flexibility to help a project that provides community benefits. That's something that their Durango Renewal Partnership and our partners want to see. That's where the URA can step in and help make that project get realized. We see this area having, if you go back for one more second, I just want to let everyone know that last night, the Urban Renewal Authority, the Durango Renewal Partnership Board, passed the Midtown Urban Renewal Plan. It's the plan that actually authorizes these tax incentives and puts these tools into place. We're taking the plan next to City Council. We'll have a public hearing on next week, March 16th. There'll be a public hearing on the Midtown Plan. And after that, the council will vote on actually adopting the plan. Once that plan's adopted, then the tax increment comes online for 25 years is the time frame to start collecting that increment, and the time frame to start doing some public-private partnerships and make some targeted investments in this Midtown area. We're also excited to work with Mike, tease this up a bit. We're going to be hosting a developer outreach forum on March 31st. We've done a lot of work with community engagement. We held a resident forum back in November where we invited every property owner in the Midtown area to a forum and talked about this new initiative. And we got a lot of strong support from the property owners and businesses in the area. And so now we're excited to take it to local developers, regional developers, and even statewide. We'll also be working with Downtown Colorado, Inc. and the state's Economic Development Office, OEDIT, to host a developer outreach forum that's scheduled for March 31st. And we'll be teeing up the Midtown area, as well as a few city-owned sites that we're looking at creating an RFP for and potentially looking at redevelopment of. And so we'll provide some more information at this developer outreach forum, but we're excited to partner with the Alliance and get the word out and highlight some of these new exciting opportunities for development. On the left here is my contact information. Scott Shine, the city's planning manager, is also a lead staffer for the Durango Renewal Partnership. And so please reach out if you have any questions. I tried to get through all this in about 7 minutes, and it's not always easy to talk about tax increment financing and urban renewal in 6 or 7 minutes. But the big picture is we're doing a lot of exciting work through a strong partnership with the county, the school district, the BID, the economic development organizations. And we've got a lot of good momentum now. We've got the plan in place. It's on the cusp of being adopted and enacted. And then that really allows us to start using these tools and to start looking at some projects that provide some strong community benefits, most notably workforce housing, but it can also be small business support, better walkable and infrastructure improvements, and so forth. And so we'd encourage you to reach out with any questions. We'd love for everyone on this call to come to that outreach forum later this month. And please stay involved and yeah, excited. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to come here.
Appreciate it, Alex. It's a valiant effort to get through those acronyms in 7 minutes. So proud of you. We'll turn it over to Jasper Welch. Morning, Jasper. He's going to talk through the lodger's tax.
Good morning, Mike and Emily, and to members of the Alliance and the investors. The slide deck will come up here shortly, but what we're going to be talking about today is the ballot issue that the City Council has placed on the ballot for Durango voters. That's coming up on April 6th. The early voting starts on March 22nd. And I've been asked to chair the campaign. We have a number of members from local arts organizations, economic development organizations, tourist organizations, community members. We're all volunteers, and we're supporting the increase in the lodger's tax. It would benefit multiple parties and overall benefit Durango in the areas of transit services, sustainable tourism marketing, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that, what it is, arts and cultural events, some of the nonprofits, they would have to be under contract with the city. So the city would be managing all the funds and looking at trying to do a better job on sustainable year-round tourism. So let's go to the next slide. I just have 4 slides because I want to leave it open for questions and comments in the chat box. This is a sample ballot that you probably can't exactly read, but we could send you one. And in addition to the 7 city council candidates that will be up for election, there will also be just the single ballot issue 1A. You're going to be able to vote by mail. Ballots are going to be going out next week. Last Friday, the 5th of March, is when the Tabor notice went out. And you'll notice in the Tabor notice, there's a pro position. There's also an opposition position, which in my opinion, and I represent no one other than myself on this, but it's a pretty, really what we don't think Durango is all about. Terms like infested with tourists, that's a false assumption. The city was overrun. If you look at the airport numbers, you can see how important tourism is, and it's a big part of our economy, and it's been a big part of our economy. A little bit of history before we get into the breakouts of how the monies would be spent. There's some of us, what I've noticed after being in Durango for over 40 years is after about 10 years, people actually forget what happened and just start making stuff up. But way back in 1980, we passed the lodger's tax. I was a young chamber executive. We had about a $5,000 marketing budget. We had the railroad in purgatory, and it was pretty skinny. We didn't have street trees downtown. And when we passed the lodger's tax in 1980, generated about $100,000 in revenue. And we started marketing Durango in a responsible way. We've done that for about 40 years, and we have a better community because of it and because of the strength that tourism has helped bring our economy. So what's different now? What's different now is we have other needs. One is sustainable tourism marketing. How do we market our community, but still maintain our cultural, ethnic, and community identity? How do we improve our community and still make it available for locals and those people that live here? The next thing we'd be working on is transportation and transit services. That's always been an important part of tourism marketing, whether it's the airport or the downtown trolley. People need to get around, and so that's part of the transportation, 20% toward that. And then arts and cultural events and programs, all the way from the Durango Creative District to many of the other programs in town. This would not be direct funding to those nonprofits. Everything would go to the city, and the city would be doing those allocations based on these percentages. And finally, 11% for purposes above and any impacts. Let's say we needed to build some new public restrooms somewhere. There is money in there for facilities based on the council's final determination. Next slide. So why to vote yes? It's a tax that locals don't pay. It's bringing our visitors that come in, unless you're staying in hotels. Most of us actually stay in our homes. So locals don't pay it. It will strengthen our economy, tourism and the related things in the arts, giving stronger transit. It will support that. It will help our arts and creative, supporting annual events. So whether the event is something like the Durango Bluegrass Meltdown, all of those sort of things would be supported through this, but under a contract with the city. We have community support. We've met with a number of community partners over the last several years under the direction of the city council had asked us to get together. And I think we've come up with a good compromise for everybody. And really now is the time. It's been 40 years since we've increased the lodger's tax. So just wrapping things up, you can see what you would be supporting. The actual tax increase would go from 2% to 5.25. It would put us in line with other cities in Colorado. The average rate in Colorado is between 14 and 15% sales tax plus lodger's tax. We'd be at 13.65. That's 8.5 sales tax and 5.25 lodger's tax. So with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it back to your members and investors, and I'd be glad to address any questions or comments, either from staff or from the members.
Super. Thank you, Jasper. Again, if there's any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat feature, and we can circle back and get those questions routed to the correct person and get them answered for you. We'll turn it over to Tim Walsworth, the Executive Director of BID. He's going to talk about some bump outs downtown and an update on our 5-star certification program. Morning, Tim.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody. Just to play off Jasper's presentation, I want to let you all know that the BID is one of those organizations that does support the increase in this tax. We think it's well past time for us to have more money to market our town and do so in a sustainable way. So BID is on board with that for what it's worth. Let me talk about two things today. So next slide, please. I want to talk about the bump out program, and I want to talk about the 5-star program, give you all an update. So bump outs, I'll just start by saying this is a partnership with the city and BID, but really the city is doing all the heavy lifting, and I owe a huge thank you to many at the city, but especially Alex Rugoff, who was talking a little bit earlier. So Alex, thank you for your leadership in this and finding the compromises and making this thing go again. Last summer, you guys know we had these up, put them up very quickly. but they ended up being highly successful. We heard from many businesses, and this is a direct quote from one of them. It saved our bacon. That's what one said. And so what we found was that this was the difference. These extra seats and tables were the difference in being slightly profitable or being in the red for many of the restaurants and some of the retail that used it too. Even so, there's room for this program to improve, and really the improvements that you'll see this year when this comes online again are in 3 areas, and it's around accessibility, it's around safety features, and it's around the aesthetics. And so the city worked all fall and into the winter on how do we increase and change and improve the design standards for these so we can address all of them. So let's start with accessibility. So what the city and BID are encouraging the users this year to do is to build a platform, a deck type structure that is flush with the sidewalk so that anybody can just get right off the sidewalk, not have to step up or down and go right into the space. However, if that doesn't work for a business, that's okay. They can have it down on the asphalt, their space, but they need to include a ADA compliant ramp to allow people to get up and down in and out of the space in an appropriate manner. Safety, one of the main features is just replacing the parade barricades. You guys saw those defined the space last year. And so those are not gonna be a part of it this year. They're gonna be replaced by some type of robust railing that each bump out user, each business will build. They're required to put this railing around 3 sides of the structure, on every side except for the sidewalk side, of course, where people will access the space. And really that platform is the best way to do that because you can attach this railing to it and have it be pretty sturdy. What the city engineer told us the other day is that the combination of a platform and a railing, it's really intended to mimic the curb, and the curb provides a little measure of protection for pedestrians walking on the sidewalk, and that's what this is designed to do as well. Aesthetics is the third area, just trying to make these things look a little nicer and a little more uniform. So there are some requirements for the look, the color palette, the materials. It is okay for businesses to have some color. It just needs to be kind of accent colors, not the main colors. And so we'll see the tents, pop-up tents that they use to provide some shade, and those will have some color, and that's perfectly fine. But the city fire department is requiring that all those tents be flame retardant rated, which is appropriate. Another good new feature is that the city will be adding concrete planters to replace those orange water-filled crash barriers that you saw last year on the oncoming traffic side. And so those were fine. They served a purpose, but they didn't look pretty. It looked like a construction zone when we critiqued it. And so if you guys look in the transit center parking lot right now, there's about 20 of these large rectangular shaped concrete planters. There's maybe 3-4 feet high. And so those will cap the space on the oncoming traffic side. And then they will be filled with dirt, of course, and flowers and little shrubs and things like that, and really beautify downtown in all these spaces. Timing, the first round of applications, the businesses do have to apply to use this and present their plan and their drawings and all that. The applications were due yesterday. And so Alex Rugoff and his crew at the city are evaluating those. I'm sure they've already been doing it, and they'll be evaluating them today and tomorrow. And then the first round of installations will occur next week on the 15th. And then essentially every 2 weeks after that for, several 2-week timeframes until we get all these installed and built out. And the businesses last year, one thing we heard loud and clear when we evaluated the program is let us start it earlier. You guys might remember they weren't available until let's see, middle of June, and really most people didn't activate till July. And we heard from the businesses, let us get these up in time for spring break, and spring break is literally right now. And so that's going to be happening. And so that's awesome. Last couple of things, there is a reimbursement grant. It's funded primarily by the city, but BID contributed as well. And it will reimburse the businesses for 50% of their costs, labor, and materials to build these things, and even furniture and pop-up tents and even beautification to it. But it is capped at $3,000. And then lastly, again, just a kudos to Alex and really the city's ability to work individually with businesses on their applications to make sure they're successful and they get approved right away. So that's what we know about bump outs. Next week, you'll see some of them return, and then every couple of weeks after that. I'll come back to that question here in just a second. Let me talk quickly about the 5-star program. So just a reminder, you guys probably know this, the core concept of this program, the state authorized right around Christmas time, was that businesses implement enhanced safety protocols, and in return, they get additional capacity. And so it was really kind of focused around restaurants, although other business types are able to take advantage of it. I really liked it, as did everybody involved in standing this program up, because it was a good way to try to balance public health and economic health. And you guys know that's been a super tough balance to strike. It's been out of balance, and rightfully so. And at the beginning of this, and we've been trying to get back to putting those two things in balance. And this program did a good job of doing that. Unfortunately, I don't know that primary benefit was really fully realized, because the state's dial that determines how open we can be, there kept being changes to it. And those changes were pro-business changes, but it undermined a little bit of the intent of the 5-star program. So that was a little frustrating, but we've kept at it, and we qualified 53 restaurants and 2 gyms have this certification. We have not received any new applications in several weeks now. As of right now, La Plata County is in level yellow. You guys who follow that will know that. And what that means is that the 5-star approved business can operate at the next less restrictive level, which is level blue. And the state just changed the dial again. They're continuing to make tweaks to it. I think that's really in response to the vaccine beginning to take hold in our state. And that dial is going to change along with that as we make progress there. And so what level blue allowances are with these changes made Sunday are, for restaurants, they can have 50% of their capacity for indoor dining, or they can go up to 225 people, whichever is fewer per room. Now, you guys know, I can't even think of one place where 225 people can dine in a restaurant. There's a couple of ballrooms, but not restaurants. So we won't have any business that approaches that hard cap number. But it will allow them to max out what they can get into their space, keeping 6-foot distance between tables. It also extends last call back to 2 a.m. That's the traditional time for that. And that's been a lot earlier throughout the pandemic, and that's back to normal time. Last comment, the 5-star program, it's in place through early to mid-April. We're trying to kind of see how spring break goes, wait a couple, 2-3 weeks after that, and just make sure our numbers aren't going to go crazy. And then the committee that's in charge of it will reevaluate, is the program effective? Do we want to keep it going or not? So that's my presentation. I had one question in the chat. Is it okay if I answer that question right now?
You bet, Tim. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, why can't we close off a few blocks on Main? I'm sure it's been considered. Yes, it's been considered. Shutting down Main is not easy. It's not supported by every user downtown. What it would do is make it safer to some degree, because you wouldn't have any traffic driving down Main. But traffic driving down Main is valuable for businesses, for being seen, for deliveries, for emergency access. And so we just haven't been able to figure out exactly how to balance that yet. I had tried last year to pilot on a weekend later in the season, shutting it down to traffic, and then, really evaluating that and measuring it and seeing how it went. We weren't able to do that. So we'll see if we can try it again this year to see how it goes. Honestly, pedestrian malls, like if that's what we think, maybe that's the future of Maine. There are a couple of examples, some examples right here in Colorado that they're very successful. And there's a lot of places that did them and had to scrap them. And so I'm a little wary about going all the way there, but how we'll think that through is that BID and the city later this year will revisit the downtown vision and strategic plan document that has not been updated since 2006. And it will allow us to ask these types of questions for all the stakeholders downtown, property owners, business owners, and the public. And we'll see where they land. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Super appreciate it, Tim, and appreciate you advocating for the businesses downtown and that district. Superintendent Snowberger, you're bringing us home. We've
Great.
got about 12 minutes left or so in the meeting.
Fantastic.
I'll turn it over to you and Nick. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm the warm-up for Nick Huber, who's one of our students who gives me a great hope for our community and our future. So I'll just share a couple of quick intros to information on the district and then turn it over to Nick to share our portrait of a graduate that he's been a huge leader in helping us create. First, we're approaching spring break. Our spring break is next week. We're really excited that Saturday was a completion of our vaccines for our staff. So we should be fully have maximum benefit from those vaccinations when we return from spring break. We have been dealing with an awful lot of quarantines in our district. We've had, I believe, over 28 was my last number that I counted since February 1st. And so it's easy to kind of hang your head and say, wow, 28 quarantines. The good news is that it's still about 90% of our kids are in school. And so while quarantines are not fun, they are showing our system is working and we're preventing the spread at school. So after spring break, we certainly are working with our task force. We have a staff task force that trying to lead teachers and support staff to increasing our in-person learning. Like Tim just said, we want to monitor and make sure that we don't see a major spike following spring break. But we are looking forward to expanding our in-person services for all students, including our high schoolers. We know that half-day high school in-person is not what everyone desires long-term, and we're anxious to get our high schoolers back into school full-time, and let's have a great end of the year with the last quarter of our school year. So certainly expect more information on that as we work through our task force this week to begin continuing to analyze our numbers. Many have said, well, you said that a yellow was this. As Tim mentioned and many others have mentioned, we flirted with yellow and blue for the last 3 to 4 weeks. And so we actually had 7 days in blue and then popped right back into yellow. And so again, what we don't want to do is have our kids become yo-yos and come to school and then not come to school and be 4 days and 5 days and 4 days. So we really are wanting to make the move when we see some consistency. Most of you have heard of our Homegrown Talent Initiative and our Southwest Collaborative initiatives. Tom Stridicus leading our Southwest Collaborative, receiving over $3 million from the Governor's RISE grant to continue to expand our trades and our career pathways for students in our region. Our Homegrown Talent Initiative has been a focused effort by Durango High School and really analyzing how can we truly produce the students as citizens that all of you want to hire here in Durango. And so I'm going to introduce Nick Huber. Nick is an amazing student at Durango High School, someone, again, who, as I said early on, give me a lot of hope for what our future is in Durango. And I think you'll agree after meeting Nick how amazing this young man is and the work that he's led here at Durango High School. So with that, Nick, I'll turn it over to you to share a portrait of a graduate.
Thank you, Mr. Snowberger. And just to start, I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Thank you for participating, and I'm excited to share some great news that we have with you. So first of all, I'm Nick Huber. I'm a junior at Durango High School, and I've been involved in the Homegrown Talent Initiative team for about 1.5 years now. We started September of 2019. And from this slide, you can see I've been involved with a few different organizations throughout the community and the state. And I am just really excited to share this information with you. So the next slide kind of talks about our Homegrown Talent Initiative. which we have been working on for about a year and a half. And this Homegrown Talent Initiative is really a statewide partnership that supports rural communities in an effort to create homegrown, career-connected learning experiences for our K through 12 students, and then have those experiences aligned to the needs and aspirations of our local economy. So this program is really focusing on building connections between our local schools and our local businesses and the economy. So it provides some great opportunities for both our students in collaborating with local businesses, as well as our local businesses in collaborating with students and really developing that talent pipeline straight from the high school to our local economy. So as you can see on this slide, we emphasize the career-connected learning continuum in the opportunities that we provide to students. This has just been a great way to kind of look at the opportunities we have available and how we can engage students in this career-connected learning. Really, what we emphasize in this program is work-based learning for our students, which really focuses on like hands-on experiences and collaborations with our local community members. So actually, with the Homegrown Talent Initiative, we've been working on a few different projects, but mainly to develop resources to facilitate these collaborations and opportunities for students. In the next slide, it kind of details one of our most exciting projects, I think, that really provides some great opportunities for the Durango community, which is called our Portrait of a Graduate. So because Homegrown Talent Initiative is really trying to build collaborations and connections throughout the community, we've engaged all of our stakeholders throughout this entire process, including students, staff, teachers, higher education representatives, local business leaders, and a variety of different stakeholders. And those collaborations have all been utilized in the development of this resource. It's a document that we produced that is intended to guide some programs, as well as provide those connections throughout the community. And when we met with our stakeholders to develop this document, we were really able to determine what our local businesses are looking for in graduates from Durango High School, as well as skills we think students who are graduating from Durango High School would be able to use to find success after high school. Really, we're just trying to provide opportunities for students to learn these skills and succeed in anything they want to do after high school. You know, whether that's going straight into the workforce or participating in a post-secondary institution or going into the military. You know, there's so many different options for students. We really want our students to feel prepared to find success in anything they're interested in. So after, actually, could you go back a little bit? Thank you. After collaborating with our stakeholders, we developed these 7 different transferable skills and 3 different behaviors that we would find important. So it's really, this document highlights those skills. And of course, there'll be supporting programs and documents to make sure our students are really able to learn these skills and you know, get feedback on how they can improve throughout their high school education. And actually, we're looking to, you know, implement this in not just high school, but middle and elementary schools as well. So it'll really be a resource to guide our students through learning and how gaining these transferable skills to be successful. And then of course, we've shared this with our community partners in an effort to, you know, build that collaboration with our businesses and our schools. So when businesses are able to help our students to learn these transferable skills, our students can then, you know, better understand these skills and then take that back to the businesses. Which is a great opportunity for everyone in the community. And just to emphasize that community connection, in the next slide, it talks about our 4A grant, or bond rather. And this has been an amazing effort that the district has provided us. We've found that we have so much community support with these programs and these new initiatives that we're implementing at Durango High School, as is evident with the 4A bond. Over 70% community approval with this bond has given us some funds to really look at work-based learning at the high school and try to build up these opportunities for students and connected with our local economy as well. So we've we've been given approximately $10 to $12 million to fund a new innovation school at Durango High School. This innovation center will really emphasize work-based learning and then community collaboration. So we're looking at having our local businesses directly in this facility and working with students, and students having the opportunity to learn these skills and take those to our local economy and our local businesses. So just so many great opportunities that are coming out of this program, and both the Portrait of a Graduate as a resource and then this new innovation center as well. So I'm very excited to see how we can move forward with these programs. And we're always looking for community partnerships. We have several right now, and we've actually started an internship program, which really utilizes these community collaborations. We have about 15 students that are participating in local businesses, but we're always looking for more support. And work-based learning isn't just about internships. There's, as you can see from this slide, there's several different opportunities available to businesses to become engaged with our high school. And these are just a few of the ways that you can help us and support these programs, as it really does provide great opportunities for both our students and our local businesses. So if you'd like to become more involved, contact Janae Hunderman with the Business Education Connection. I think she'll be able to drop a link or an email address in the chat, but she's really been instrumental in facilitating those collaborations. And I just thank you again for listening to what I have to say and all of the great things that are happening at the high school. And we're thankful for our community support.
Awesome presentation, Nick. I think you should be maybe a fourth top candidate for the new superintendent. Just outstanding job. We appreciate everything you're giving back to the community and presenting this program. Really appreciate it. With that, we're moving towards adjourning the meeting. I'll turn it back over to our Executive Director, Michael French, for some closing comments.
Jameson, I think Nick should come work at the Alliance if he doesn't take the superintendent job. Janae's doing great work with the internships. Thank you, Janae, for all you do. I think that in today's meeting, we saw, progress in vaccination. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is how well the tax revenues are doing in Bayfield, Ignacio, and the county. That coupled with signs of recovery that Tony highlighted, I think we're seeing a big shift in momentum, overall. And we're certainly starting to focus more on our strategic initiatives, which again are workforce housing, business capacity and growth, and workforce development, like the program that Nick is talking about. So excited about the next few months, because I think it's going to shape the next few years, to be honest. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And our next meeting will be April 13th. It's the second Tuesday of the month.